I am the director of the farming programme in DEFRA, and I and my colleagues are responsible for taking England out of the Common Agricultural Policy and introducing our new approach to environmental land management schemes, farm productivity and innovation support, and farm regulation. And I have the best job in government by a country mile. And the reason I love it is because we get to take a holistic view of those issues and genuinely try and make things work for farmers, for food production, and for the environment and climate, which has been a theme across all of the conversations, certainly, that I've heard here at Groundswell this year and in the previous few years. And that's what we're trying to do. It's all about balance. It's all about trying to maintain domestic food production and also have profitable, thriving farm businesses and also deliver improvements for the climate and environment, which can only be done on farmland, given that farmers look after 70% of the land in England. I am only talking about England because agriculture is devolved. Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland have their own policies, obviously, and I can't speak for those. Before I just get into it, so I'm just going to give an update, fairly briefly, about where we're up to and what's coming next, and then take questions. We won't have loads of time for questions, but we have got a stand over there with lots of my friendly colleagues from DEFRA, RPA, Forestry Commission, Natural England, who are keen to talk to you, and I'm around all afternoon, and also we exist beyond today. So now we're all friends. You can follow up whenever you like and ask us whatever you want whenever you like, because the only way we're going to make this work is if we are constantly talking to you, listening to you, finding out what's working, making things better, and genuinely trying to ground what we're doing in your practical experience and expertise, and respecting the roles that you have, looking after your land, and the fact that you're the ones who know what's best to do on each of your farms, and we should be here to enable you and facilitate that and get behind you and not get in your way. I want to just say something about the context that you're all operating in, because it's important. It doesn't go without saying that we in DEFRA respect and recognise and value the primary role that you're trying to play about producing food and other agricultural goods, and also the fact that you are running a business and that needs to be a viable, profitable business, but also to recognise that many of you are already doing the things that we're wanting to see, and actually what we need to do is support those who are already doing those things and encourage and enable more people to do more of it. So it's important to say that, and also to say we recognise that the environment you're in is unprecedentedly challenging. You're at the forefront of dealing with the impacts of climate change whilst also being blamed for it. You've got all the economic volatility that we know about. You've got huge uncertainty in terms of policy transformation, although I think that's becoming less uncertain now, but also uncertainty about the economic future, the trade future, etc. So we very much recognise that that's the world we're operating in, and we really want to work with farmers, and we have been working with farmers as deeply and extensively as we can to try and get these things that we're doing to a good place. The things that we're doing, most importantly and fundamentally, we're trying to transform the way that we offer services to you as farmers, where we're trying to have a grown-up relationship, where you can trust us to be business-like and you can have confidence in us to be business-like and fair and proportionate and also effective where it matters, and to recognise the balance that you're all trying to strike about making your business viable, producing food, and also producing for nature and the climate. And also we've got to make sure that regulation and schemes and grants work together in a holistic way. So that's the first and foremost thing that we've got to do. We recognise that we haven't always earned your trust and confidence, and that's a big mountain to climb. We've made a lot of changes in the last few years. There's more to come, and we can get into that in the question and answer if you like, but it's all about being business-like and fair and effective, giving you reason to have confidence in us so you can see us like you might see any other trusted advisor, people who respect what you're trying to do, are here to help, and can offer something useful to you. That's the most important thing we're doing. The other things that we're doing are all about the outcomes that I've mentioned for food, farming, and environment and climate. And they split into two broad categories. We've got our ongoing agri-environment schemes, where we're continuing with countryside stewardship. And the reason we're doing that is because we did have a plan to introduce a different scheme. When we made that plan, countryside stewardship was not a successful scheme. It was seen as bureaucratic. We weren't making payments on time. We were straight after the Cap D fiasco, which I'm sure you all remember very well, and certainly we all do. I wasn't there, but the institutional memory runs very deep, and we don't want that to happen again. But by the time we got to the kind of last year, actually countryside stewardship was in a more stable position. We had a lot more people in it, and farmers were saying to us, why do you do this? Why do you introduce a scheme? It's not very good. spend 5 years making it any good, and then abolish it and start a new one. Could you please just not do that? So that's why we're carrying on countryside stewardship. No change in ambition. We're going to deliver the outcomes through that existing scheme that we were going to deliver through local nature recovery. So providing for ambitious actions, decent payments, join up across local areas, and getting those climate and environment outcomes alongside food production. Landscape recovery is the larger scale, longer term projects which are bespoke. And we've had the first round of those. We've got 22 projects. And the next round is now open for applications. And if you haven't had a look at that, and if you're thinking that's not for you because you're a farmer producing food, please do look again. Most of the projects that are in landscape recovery so far, almost all of them, are groups of farmers working together, producing food, and also looking after nature at the same time. And they will tend to be operating in general a more extensive kind of a model, and they are doing some quite deep conservation and improvement work, but they are producing food as well, and it's about food and nature going hand in hand. So please take a look at that if you're interested in a longer term, larger scale, collaborative type project. And then Sustainable Farming Incentive is our scheme that's designed for mass uptake. No, we haven't got that yet, but we will do. It's designed for mass uptake of actions that you can do in the course of your farming. Things like integrated pest management, nutrient management, taking care of your soil, things that you do in the field and around the field that make your farming operation more sustainable and more resilient, both from a business perspective and also from an environment perspective. And a lot of that, the actions in there are in a sweet spot where they are good for the farm and food production and environment. So if you haven't taken a look at that yet, we published a lot of details last week about that scheme and how it will operate from this point forward. And we were very upfront in that publication about the fact that we've learned a huge amount from our pilots, from our tests and trials, from early rollout of the initial limited offer of that scheme. And there are some things we are going to carry forward into the next stage about that, the flexibility, the way that we've expanded the scope of things to do, trying to make sure there's something for every farmer in there, making it very straightforward to apply and manage, having more proportionate and pragmatic controls. But there are some things we're not taking forward because we found that they don't work as well for farmers. And that includes bundling things together so that you have to do everything in a standard, and you can only progress through the levels of ambition if you do all of it. And the reason that doesn't work, the reason we did that was to make it straightforward to access, to make it easy to understand what things to do in combination and to make the whole thing more straightforward. But actually it's turned out for a lot of farmers, the particular combination we wanted you to do isn't quite right for your farm. You want to be able to pick and mix more. So this year's offer, from now on, it's going to be much more pick and mix. You can do as much or as little as you like. It's a much broader offer. There's 23 actions in there now. And you can do as much or as little as you want of each of them. They're much more flexible. The scheme agreements are 3 years long, so that if you're on a short-term tenancy, you can still come in, and various other marvellous features. So I really want to thank those who've taken part in our pilot and in early rollout, and everyone who's given us feedback along the way. And I really hope you can see that we have actually been listening to that, and we are genuinely committed to testing and learning as we go. And I know that's not normal for government, and I know also there's always a balance to strike between providing certainty but also flexing and adapting. And that's a very tricky balance to strike because we know you need some certainty to be able to plan, but we must flex and adapt the scheme and make it into an improving, ongoing system rather than setting it in stone and then just having to live with it forever with all its imperfections, because that's how we're going to get to it being really good. I want to just say something about countryside stewardship, because I know there's a rumour going around that nobody got into higher tier this year, and that's not true. But, so, higher tier, we had just over 700 applications for higher tier this year. We've accepted 530 of those, so that's a lot more than we've done in previous years. There are some of those that weren't in. I'm very sorry if you applied and you're disappointed, but that is absolutely not the end of the road. There's a lot of those applications that weren't accepted into the higher tier scheme, where you can do a lot of what you wanted to do in a mid-tier agreement, and I really encourage you to take a look at that. The things we're doing to increase access to higher tier in future years and to allow more people to do more of the things they want to do, because of course if you want to do stuff, we want to support you to do it, are improving access to that higher tier type of scheme, which is for schemes that really need a bespoke, intensive level of engagement with natural England. But also, we want to bridge the gap between higher tier and mid-tier offers, so that if you're mainly doing things that are in mid-tier and you've got relatively smaller areas of very important work to do, but they're not at the sort of scale or in the sort of places that need natural England to be all over your whole agreement, we're looking at routes to allow you to do that in a less intensive way. And we'll say more about that later this year. and we will make further progress on that next year. So if you're hearing nobody got in at all, that's not true, but it is true that some people have been turned away who would much prefer not to have been and had high quality applications. And for those people, do take a look at mid-tier and also look at how we're going to develop the scheme next year. And then there's a lot of folk that's a competitive scheme. What you want to do is more suited to mid-tier, actually, so do take a look. The last thing I just want to say is how we're doing this. As I've said, we are taking a test and learn approach, as many of you do on your farms, and we're trying to work in partnership with farmers, and we're trying to, over time, get this right, and we're trying to build a self-improving machine so that we don't finish it one day and go, well, that's that job done then, see you later, because it will never be done. There'll always be developments in practice, in science, in our understanding of what's working and what isn't working for farmers, and we've got to be able to keep iterating and improving, but the level of change will begin to stabilize over the next couple of years in terms of how the scheme operates and the structure of it is our expectation. So bear with us, keep telling us what you think about it because we genuinely are listening. And the reason we're doing that is not just because we're nice, although of course I am very nice, and that's not the reason. The reason is because the only way this is going to work is if it works for you. And so we absolutely have to ground what we're doing in your practical experience and knowledge and understanding of how this is going to work, and we have to provide the flexibility so that you can make it work on your farm, innovate, try things, experiment in a way that you're not afraid you're going to get whacked with an unfair penalty, and we can all work together to take this all forward. That's all I want to say by way of introduction, just to set the scene, but we are going to have a bit of time before we see the important folk, the politicians, to take questions. So I'm very happy to take some questions if you would like. Over here, there's somebody, and there's some, thank you very much. There'll be some running around with microphones going on. Hi there.
Hi there. Yes, Tom Allen-Stevens
on
Farm Innovation Network. Thank you very much, by the way, Janet. You are doing a marvellous job.
Oh,
but I just want my question is on innovation, and specifically accelerating adoption, the farmer-led element of DEFRA's R&D strategy. I keep asking the Minister about this, and he reacts as if he hasn't got a clue. Could you just briefly describe what it is, and importantly, what the timetable is and what the budget is? Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, I get a dry mouth, and also my nose runs. If you've seen me talk before, you'll know this. There we go. Right, so the innovation, thank you very much, Tom, for that question. The innovation work that we're doing is designed to achieve a number of things. One of them is create more innovative solutions, and so we've got funding and grants available for that. If you want to have a partnership between industry and farmers to create and invent and try more innovative solutions, then have those sorts of funds. We're also looking, though, very importantly, at how we can accelerate the pace at which and the ease with which the sector can adopt those innovative solutions. And that's where we have farmer-led projects actually trying to apply those solutions on their farm, see how they work, and get them to scale. And Tom, I know you're involved, in fact, in one of those projects. And then we've got a range of other kind of partnership-based, research-based, all sorts of different types of funding opportunities to try to pump prime and support the innovator end of the spectrum and get that innovation as swiftly as possible to market. And so there's let me look at so there's Farming Futures funding open now until July, and that's focused on improving resilience in whatever way on your farm. We've got small research and development partnerships coming, and they will open for applications in August 2023. We've got some grant funding for feasibility studies coming from September 2023 as well. If you want to see the schedule, then have a look at the Funding for Farmers page on gov.uk, and there's a link there to UKRI, which gives you the schedule of what's coming. And I really encourage you to take a look. One of the things we're doing, though, I should say, is we're very well aware that there's quite a plethora of different types of grants and schemes around, not just in government, but also privately. We can't control the private market, nor should we, but what we certainly can do is streamline our offer. And one of the things we're thinking about for next year is not only adding in more actions that you can do in the schemes, and we published some information about that in January, listing everything we're going to pay for, and we'll publish more detail about what's coming next year in a more granular way in October, but also we're wanting to make a big leap forward next year in the coherence across all the schemes and make it much more simple for you to pick and mix options across what are currently different schemes so that you can make an agreement that works for you. You don't have to learn the names of lots of different grants and schemes, etc. But it's just much more easy for you to say, I want to do these things, and then find them in a language and at a time and in a way that works for you. You certainly shouldn't have to pay someone to tell you what's available or fill the forms in for you. So we've made some progress on that. We'll make more progress on that next year as well. So you won't need to know this fund, and this fund. There'll be much more of a streamlined offer. Who's next? Oh gosh, lots of hands up over there. Thank you.
You said you had a very high level of applications for higher tier. What are you expecting for this round of landscape recovery in terms of numbers of applications?
We think it depends. We really can't tell until we actually see the applications. We're seeing a really good level of engagement and lots of people interested. Last time round, I think there was a constraint which was brand new. And therefore, it was going to be appealing to people who are already in groups and already kind of thinking about what they wanted to do, but also lots of people don't want to take part in the first round of something. They want to wait and see how it plays out, so we can expect more interest because people have had a longer amount of time to get ready. They've seen how it played out. They've seen some of the projects. They thought, oh, maybe it is for us after all. So we think there'll be a good, healthy level of interest. And what we do, we've got a kind of plan of how many projects we're going to fund, which is up to 25. But we do, with the budget, we do manage it flexibly now. We don't have pillars. We have an overall budget, and we have control over it, and that means there's some uncertainty in it, but that was a feature, not a bug. The whole point was we could then respond to demand, see what we're seeing, see where farmers want to go, and we're always mindful of what's going to work for farmers and what's going to hit all three of our goals around productivity and farm business prosperity, food production, and environment and climate. So we'll see what comes in, and ministers will make decisions about how best to cut the budget during that time. But again, it's not all or nothing with these schemes. Often, if you don't quite get into landscape recovery, maybe you get in next time, maybe there's another route, maybe there's a funding available. And so I really want to encourage everybody not to be thinking, oh gosh, if I don't get into that, there's nothing at all for me, because there is a range of things on offer, and that will be increasing again next year. So keep at it if you are working on that, is what I would say there. Hello. Oh, over there.
Hi.
Hi.
It was more a curiosity from me. So for the innovation funding, there are so many projects that are going around. How are you going to handle the data? How are you going to use the data to improve, for example, the future schemes?
Yeah, this is really important and something we've been working really hard on in the last couple of years. We've had pretty much more than now 5,000 farmers working with us one way or another in tests and trials, in our pilots, in innovation projects, and in more kind of specific co-design. And also I engage with lots of farmers all the time on social media and in person, and I love it. It's the best part of my job. I think there's two things that we really, really need to get good at. One is feeding back what we've done about it, because I think often that's not visible to people who've taken part, and we're doing a better job of that now, I think. We've really tried to explain with SFI where we've made changes and why, but we can always do better. But also systematizing the way we synthesize everything that we're learning and act on it. And so those two things, we've made a good lot of progress in the last couple of years, but that's part of the self-improving machine that I'm talking about. So what we want is systematic feedback loops all the time, like you would be trying to create on your farm, so you can see what's going on, survey the horizon, decide what to do next, keep at it forever, because we do not want to have a point in time where we say that's done, the guillotine falls, and it's now set in stone for 10 years, because we know that when we do that, it will become out of date. So it's a good question, it's a really important one. I wouldn't claim we've got everything perfect yet, but we have made progress, more to be done over the next year. Where shall I go? There's somebody in the middle over here. Can you reach? Let's go here, and then there. This lady here in the middle.
Thanks very much.
Hi.
If a farmer is receiving private finance for regenerating an area of land, can they also receive public finance for the same area of land, and vice versa? So
yeah, you can. So this is a very important question, and often of great interest, particularly to the Groundswell crowd, but also others. I don't mean to call you a crowd, but I mean this particular cohort of farmers often ask about this. You can do. Nobody in the market is going to want to pay for the exact same thing twice, because that doesn't make any sense. So what we've got to do is what we want for farmers is for you to be able to blend different kinds of finance, depending on what you want to do, who you want to sell your goods to, what the right thing to do for your business is. From a government perspective, we want to be complementing private schemes, not competing with them, because it's not our job to compete with private schemes. We're going to complement them. Exactly what that looks like, will unfold over the next 5, 10, even 20 years because the market is very new. So I think it would be a fool's errand to say at this point, right then, here's how it's going to work. We've written it down, that's the end of that. So we've got to let the market kind of develop. What we've said for now is that in landscape recovery, it's actually an explicit objective of that scheme to help those projects bring in private finance. And part of the 2-year development phase at the beginning is thinking about how are you going to do that. For SFI, we've said, okay, then maybe there's a risk that we end up paying for something that somebody else is paying for, but that risk is so small. The risk of crowding out private finance and tying you all up in bureaucratic knots is much bigger. So what we've actually said in that scheme is, if you want to have private funding on the same land or whatever, have at it, keep going, but that we will have to keep this under review over time because, as I say, nobody in the market, us or anybody else, wants to pay for something that somebody else is already paying for, and we've got to find a way to let these things sort of tessellate nicely so that you can combine them and everybody in the market can be confident that they're paying money for things that are actually real. So you might do different things on the same land or different aspects of things on the same land. One of the things I think government is going to have a really important contribution to make is where the markets are often looking for additionality and net gain. We really want to make sure that those who've already made gains don't lose out. And so maintaining existing practices and habitats is really important for our target outcomes. And so a lot of what we're paying for will cover that. And it might be that you see a tessellation there between additionality and maintenance. It might be that it goes that way. It might be different types of activity. We've got to see how it develops. The lady in the middle over here.
Thank you. Yes, Isabel Ross from Three Keel. We run the Landscape Enterprise Networks, and my question was precisely, how are you designing your schemes to enable public-private finance stacking? So we are meeting this question now directly with our farmers. So the greater clarity that you can provide, because it's happening now, would be most welcome. And I think there is some contradiction in the guidance for SFI at the moment. So any clarity you can bring would be most welcome.
Okay, if you think there is a contradiction, I'm very keen to know specifically what it is, and we'll line it out, because the intent is what I've just said, and it definitely does say in there, if you want to be in a private scheme, then you can. I think the other aspect of this, my colleague Helen Edmondson was here yesterday, and she leads on private finance. The other aspect of this is government's role in helping to set the rules of the game for private finance, which I know is something that is very important to people to feel confident in dipping their toe into the private markets. And that's work that is now continuing at pace, and Helen was talking about that yesterday here. But as I said, we think it's really important that these things stack together, but I am not going to pretend that I know exactly how that's going to play out over the next 5 years, just because I think that would be a fool's errand, I really do. We're bound to cock it up if we do that. Let's go to this person here, 5 minutes to go. A couple more questions then. This person here, put your hand up if you want to ask a question, and then we can get, okay, over there, can be after this one.
Hiya, Emily Williams, working for Worcestershire Wildlife Trust in partnership with Severn Trent, delivering their water quality grants. I was just curious about, because those are to meet regulatory requirements, how you're using that data to see what maybe farmers are delivering through that alongside what is delivered through government grants.
Yeah, so we've got to, the overall purpose of all this is to achieve the outcomes that I mentioned. And government have said that they want to maintain domestic food production. We've said we want to increase farm productivity and prosperity. And then we've set out some quite specific contributions we're expecting farming reforms to make and farming to make to the targets for climate, water quality, air quality, and biodiversity. And within DEFRA, there's lots of work going on to see what's our theory about how that's going to happen, where are the gaps, what might we need to do differently in terms of both regulation or grants or schemes, and how do those things all stack up? So in my programme, we're particularly focused on the grants and the schemes and regulation from an overall perspective. But it is, the important thing to say about that is there's many different ways there's many different routes, choose your own routes to get to each target. And we're not trying to set a kind of, it must be X amount of this and Y amount of that and Z amount of that. What we're trying to do is, it's a system we're messing with here, not a machine. And we need to operate in that way. So we need to understand that there's all sorts of different incentives, some of which we're in control of, some of which we're not, and observe what happens when we make tweaks, and then iterate, and iterate again, and iterate again, in harmony with that wider environment. And that is a very complicated task. And I mean, if you think about it in that way, you can't really, if you're thinking about it in that way, say, and here is the exact route map to get from here to there, but that's because if we did that, we would fail. So I don't know yet exactly how that's going to pan out. I think you can expect there are some areas from a government perspective, there are some areas where there's such a large market failure in terms of compliance with regulation, that we think it's right to invest in grants now, but you would expect that that would be a time-limited thing, and eventually there'll be more strict enforcement of regulation, and I'm thinking of slurry management in particular. And that market failure is partly because there hasn't been enough enforcement, and therefore the market's responded, and now we've got to correct that. But we've always got to have an eye on what's going on in the private market, and we're not trying to, like I said earlier, we're not trying to compete with that, we're trying to complement it, all with a view to getting to that blend of outcomes over time. And it's going to be a long game, tweaking, seeing what's going on, seeing unexpected things over there, etc. Over here. And I think we've probably got time for one final one after that.
Hi, thanks very much for the talk. Really, really great to hear from you. I was just wondering if you could drill down into the CS a little bit, because you mentioned there were 700 applications and that some of those would be eligible for mid-tier instead of higher tier.
Yeah.
But I was under the impression that there were 558 applications for WD2 woodland improvement alone. So I was wondering if you could sort of clarify how you would envisage woodland management realized through mid-tier, which obviously isn't geared to do at all. Yeah,
so I was talking, the numbers I read out were the agri aspects of higher tier. There are also, as you know, the woodland aspects of higher tier, and there is also the England Woodland Creation offer. And there is some complexity between those different offers and some interdependencies between all of them. I think, I'm not sure what I can say beyond what I already said about this, apart from that I'm very sorry for those who were turned away and were disappointed. I don't want them to see that as the end of the road. There are other routes. If it's not mid-tier, then have a look at England Woodland Creation offer and other tree-related grants, and also watch out for how we are going to continue developing this in future years. I realise that doesn't help you right now, but we are going to have the facility to add things into your agreement over time. We've got that in SFI now. We're going to have it for the other schemes next year and in the following years. So also don't worry about, like, get started now with whatever it is that you can do, and then look to add things in later, whether that's by adding more options or moving into other schemes if you're successful in a future year or whatever. So I wouldn't wait, don't wait for everything to be in place. Crack on with what you can crack on with, and we will as swiftly, I promise you, we are not going slowly. We are absolutely going as swiftly as we can to get all of this stuff in place for you and provide clarity and certainty on all fronts. But as I say, there's an amount of testing and learning that's going on that means that, and that's right, because we've got to calibrate this in the right way. Let's have one over here. Oh, you've got one here. Let's go here, and then we'll go there next. And then let me just check over here. Anybody over here wanting to come in? There you go, there's somebody. Let's do those three quick.
Hello.
Let's take all three, and then I'll answer them and wrap up.
Okay. Richard Murniak here on behalf of the Aquila Farm Cluster in the West Midlands. Last year, we spent a lot of time with our farmers putting together a landscape recovery bid. We actually brought all our farmers, there are 30 of us together, in a room, spoke to them all, got them all to sign on the dotted line to say that they'd be committed to follow the 2-year process of understanding what it would take from a feasibility perspective to get the scheme up and running. I thought it was a pretty good application, actually. We were unsuccessful. And I'd like to understand why, actually, because we'd like to apply this year, but we don't want to put all that time in. You know, we're sort of doing this on the side as well as our other jobs. We've had no feedback. So we don't understand as to why we were unsuccessful, what we could do from the scheme that we sort of, or from the scheme that we put forward last year, that we could sort of adapt for this year. And we're sort of saying, well, we've got a pretty good scheme. We want to put it forward this year, but we don't understand whether it's going to be another wasted effort or whether there are elements from this that we can carry forward into this year and why we were unsuccessful and why we might be successful this time around.
Yeah, it's a really important question. And we don't want you to feel like it's the end of the road in that situation, and I hate it that you put in the effort and didn't get in. It was very competitive. We had a lot of very high quality applications for that scheme. We did send something out to all the applicants saying, reiterating the marking criteria and saying which were the areas in which you scored lower than the winning applications to give you some pointers in that direction. And we have again published exactly what the criteria are, but it is a competitive scheme. And so we're talking about taking the top 25 or whatever from the applications that we get, although we do have some flexibility, as I mentioned, around that. If you want to talk to somebody individually about this specifically, I would urge you to go over to the tent over there, because there are Forestry Commission, Natural England, RPA colleagues over there who will be able to have a bit more of a detailed conversation with you about it, and see if you can go anywhere forward from there. Yeah, the question was, is there a distinction between professional form fillers? I'm going to finish in 20 seconds. I'm really sorry for those who also had questions, but I'm going to have to get off the stage because do not time out politicians. One of the rules for being a civil servant. It's not the case that it's all big organisations. I went to visit a farm cluster that had only formed in the previous 3 months and put in an application, and they didn't have any of those big organisations involved. And most of them are groups of farmers working together. They will often have an organisation working with them, but it is definitely possible, and it has happened, that groups of farmers working together have got in, and there certainly is no prejudice against that, and it's absolutely possible to do that. Like I say, for your particular case, to get advice, talk to my colleagues over there and see who they can put you in touch with. I'm sorry I've run out of time. If you do want to follow up, talk to my colleagues, talk to me, get in touch after today. We're really keen to talk. And thank you for your kind comments earlier. I do want to just say it's not just me. There's loads of us working on this, and I'm very grateful for the nice feedback. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you around.